Well, we're at 1:30, and I think that we are moving on to sort of a debrief, which in a way we've sort of been doing, and some action planning. And as you've all been talking, I've been madly taking notes, which I can kind of recount for you. I think that the interesting question of the moment is whether organizations like all of yours and the organization you belong to, the ACCC, can, for the benefit of these new IO therapies, do certain things that can really advance your field. And like I said, I think you actually are in a prime position to demonstrate the efficacy and value of these technologies, maybe better than the general ambulatory stuff, which is by far and away the prevailing model today. I think it would be interesting to sort of explore a couple of items. And what I'd like to do is just sort of list a few things, and as I go through them, kind of get a sense of whether you guys buy in to it as an action item. And then, does that make sense? Okay. So one of the things I think that we touched on earlier that with Matt is, in addition to telehealth as a care delivery mechanism, also as an educational and proctoring solution for bringing more and more people into this capability to deliver care this way. And so the use of collaboration technologies like ECHO to extend the reach of IO therapies via telehealth or IO monitoring as well. Is that an important thing that we should consider? How about just a quick check? Put your hand up. That looks pretty good. Okay, great. If anybody thinks that's a really dumb idea, please chime in. Another one is to move beyond the video-only model and to incorporate a broader range of solutions, kind of like what we just talked about. Some of you may have taken a platform, and I think you're a good example, Sarah, and you've taken a very basic video technology in Epic, but you've bolstered it with workflows, training, safety orientation to make it strong. The same platform without that effort would not have worked for you. So I think one of the interesting questions is, can the organization start to define different models that are pertinent to different types of therapies and different types of care within the immuno-oncology domain, and really sort of present and document that for its members? Does that make sense? Yes? No? We just got to.
Could you add a financial model as a sub-layer to that?
Yeah, and a financial model as well that might back it. The third would be the patient engagement during the course of treatment using data and patient feedback on it as a standard process, so that you start to collect more quantified information about the value and benefit, not just to patients, but also to providers. So we get a better profiling of how it really works for all of you in different ways in immuno-oncology. Does that make sense? Okay, we're getting out of heads, that's good. Something that certainly came up in the discussion with Lori is, can the organization and its members help do a better job of aggregating data across many organizations on comorbidities related to treatments and how to better select and choose patients using certain methods? Good? Okay. The quantitative measure of quality of life during treatment, especially for oncology patients, and some kind of meaningful reporting to patients or to clinicians, not patients, to clinicians, on what that patient status is, also sounded like an important initiative to pursue. Yes? No? Yes? Okay. Will or should ACCC activate and pursue some of these policies for reimbursement and stabilizing reimbursement for this new field, really, of immuno-oncology and telemedicine? Sounds like that may be something that is worth tackling.
I was thinking actually we should add to that the ability to maybe speak to some of your pharma component of this and see where money's available through them as well to run some of those programs. I think you should push on them as much as possible.
She's not even reading this and she got it. So
yeah, we think alike. That's the problem with sharing brains.
New reimbursement models from the pharmas.
Yeah.
Think about it. They have the greatest benefit or the greatest amount of things to lose by negative outcomes with their particular agents. And if you as a facilitator for their treatments using these technologies get better outcomes for them, that's only good for their business and for propagating their agents. So why shouldn't they, with all of their billions of dollars, be bringing money back to your organization to use these methods to ensure safer, better outcomes for patients?
Is it legal?
Huh?
Would it be legal?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is it legal?
It is. That's a really interesting question. Is there a kickback problem?
Well, they're
I
not
don't
kicking
think
that
so.
money. They're supporting a program that supports the patients. The question is, how do they do that? In what manner? By the way, there are a lot of clinical trials that are using telemedicine already. Many across the country. Telemedicine is actually really falling into the clinical trials because it's easier to get a patient to get involved in a clinical trial when they don't have to physically show up all the time. And so, and I know the Pharma College does a lot of pharma that is involved in that. You need to look into those protocols and see how did they arrange the monies being transferred into those telehealth programs.
And
Whether it's through an investment, maybe.
Lauren?
I was going to say, in the last couple of years, I've become aware that quite a few of the large pharmas have what they call patient experience departments now.
Or innovation labs.
And I have 2 funded studies right now of e-health coaching with breast cancer patients and prostate cancer patients
There we go.
that pharmas are supporting.
Mhm.
And I have another, we're trying to finish up the contract for symptom monitoring for gastric and esophageal cancer patients to see. And I think that they're probably going to use all of that to then go into physician offices with non-branded marketing once they have, I really, I mean, they are all looking at their bottom line with this stuff, but I think they've got so much money now that these are kind of like the bells and whistles that they're adding on. And so I do think there is a big opportunity for funding there.
Various ECHO initiatives are funded through Pharma as long as it's not the commercial arm. If it's like the scientific arm or if it's a group with a foundation, there's definitely a precedent there.
They're funding this already.
By the way, the clinical trials, I think, is critical. You know, the number one reason why clinical trials fail due to the attrition of patients and physicians is the complexity and time and hassle of getting, you know, a principal investigator and a patient together in one geographic place to do their thing on a regular basis. The potential of telehealth to revolutionize that process is great. But there's another interesting twist. Think about every patient under treatment potentially becoming a clinical trial on an ongoing basis to further and further refine the techniques and methods of these agents and these treatments. With a digital health system like this, you can actually pull that off. So it becomes actually, clinical trials become more of an integrated part of ongoing care of oncology patients. I'm especially interested in your thoughts on that. Does that make sense? It becomes a continuous, not just an episodic trial, but almost a continuous one.
You could continue.
So you're thinking of a registry, like an ongoing registry type approach?
It's still covered by an IRB. I mean, there's still,
Yeah, well, this would be.
yeah, it would have to be.
Well, patients would have to consent
Right.
for their information.
They would consent
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
But do you think it's viable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Pharma is very interested
In doing so,
Approach-
because
in
they want
approach
they want the data,
Yeah.
and ultimately it might bring
Yeah.
more and more focused therapeutic strategies to you guys as a result.
The other piece of that I think is really important is that as this becomes, you know, more and more target driven and we have specific lesions that we're looking at that we're trying to treat, the number of patients that may be candidates for a particular trial can become quite low. And being able to reach them through telehealth so that if your study at, you know, in Dallas, and you've got a patient candidate that's in Goodland, Kansas, you'll be able to complete your study. And it's getting even in the melanoma world, I feel like since we're seeing so many advances in the immunotherapy piece, we have a smaller patient base that are candidates for trials that will advance the field further. So trying to figure this out, and it's not so easy because, I mean, there are regulatory issues, there are consent issues, there are practice issues. I have a program in Kansas and I have to be credentialed at all these different hospitals. I have to have practice agreements with the mid-levels or advanced practice practitioners, bad choice of words, with the APPs to try to make all this work. And it took us 1.5 years to get our first one launched. Once that model's in place, though, then that opens for pharma, that opens, basically kind of opens up the nation for patients that would be candidates for their trials. So.
Right. And I guess the final one that I just mentioned, but I think it deserves attention because it's a source of funding, is this huge bucket of money that the FCC has accumulated, where they are now drawing the line on the telecoms. It's sort of just a free telecommunications industry subsidy for years, where they did not demand proof or evidence that the medical care was being extended into remote and rural areas. This year, he's really making that a big issue. And what that means is that the telecoms may be an important partner, at least with remote patients, in bringing these services into areas very much like yours, Gary, and others, I'm sure. So that might be another thing that the ACCC could front in going to the FCC and saying, our members who are actively engaged in this can bring this kind of high value service onto these networks. Can you help us partner up with the carriers that are getting the money? Because they can't get the money without you as the partner, the way that they've structured this. So that looks like an interesting leverage point. So that's what I have. Does anybody else have other things that you would?
I would go into as far as starting an ACCC innovation fund that is funded by those bodies, just to let you know, and then have those funds available to institutions who wants to try and use that in their health centers. Now that they have you're going to have the arm of the knowledge arm, you can have the funding arm, and you can put it together to allow your constituents, if you may, to say, we will fund you if you want to start a meaningful telehealth program. And I think that you'll get very well supported for that from Pharma, from the FCC, from the Health Innovation Centers, and from other places as well.
On the FCC end, I know there's the challenge of getting broadband in the rural areas, but there's also a big thing right now around 5G, right? So is there a way to kind of do the same thing? Right. Use 5G to actually realize some of the telemedicine potentials, yes, and use that to kind of get there as another source of funds.
Yeah, and Cox and AT&T already kind of announced that for next year they will be willing to do that. So I do know it's funny, they've been willing to do that for 5 years. Nobody's going after those monies. So the question is, as an institution, can you go after those monies? And the answer is probably yes. And we're talking about a few $1 million. This is not a little bit of money. I think in totality, it's $200 and something million in there. But per project, it's like $5 to $6 million that can be grabbed. But the question is, who's going to go after those monies and how is it going to be utilized? And I think that starting some form of an innovation fund to allow that to happen, to say we're going to do that, I think will give you this latitude that you guys need. You're going to have the money and you're going to have the ability to actually start those programs. That's kind of like my thinking as a consultant. If I had to think about it, that's what I would do in order to, help you guys to move this forward as an initiative.
One thing I thought of hearing you talk, Mark, was that, how can we really leverage the telehealth technology that's available to kind of triage our immuno-oncology patients and really figure out, which patients can we monitor, that are doing well that we can do remotely, and kind of triage those to the ones who need to come into the office immediately. So we're not getting bogged down with, providers having to see 35, 40 patients at once or in one day, or there's long wait times of getting someone where they need to go, and then all of a sudden they're at that grade 4 and are in the ED and having to go to the ICU because they can't breathe or things like that. So can we use telemedicine to, better triage those patients and, keep a longer arm on the ones that are doing well and a shorter leash on the ones that need that closer follow-up to open up that clinic space that we need, because there is that provider shortage. How can we really make telemedicine work for IO instead of us trying to make IO work with telemedicine?
Right. Well, and it is a great comment. One of the things that's obvious is that potential patient decompensation may not be visible, as we all know, in a video exchange, but the vitals might tell a very different story. So that's one of the reasons why you might want to start thinking about engaging in RPM, especially for patients have got greater comorbidity challenges and things, to monitor them and be able to see those insights before it turns into something. And I'm not saying one or the other, I'm saying it really should be looked at as together. But I think that that's maybe one of the recommendations we would make for many of you, is that while, like in your case, you've got something that works, it's successful, it's well integrated into your clinical practice, but I think that the next stage here is to evolve it in that direction. And Dr. O, what's his last name again? Yes. You weren't in the meeting, Janelle and I were. This lead oncologist at Vanderbilt, when I asked him, right now you've got this little short parameter, 30-minute distance, right? How can you begin to extend those rings of service further out? In two ways. One is to build partnerships with these telemedicine platforms with other clinics that are more remote, and begin to partner with them to open up the circle of patients you can be serving and working with, so you don't have that constraint of that 30-minute distance. And the second is, what overall strategies are you planning on to ultimately make the freedom of the patient, that quality of life issue, greater and greater by being able to work with them and monitor them no matter where they go, anywhere in the world? And I think he said in both cases, those are absolutely things that we want to do. We got to get to first base. We're kind of at first base, and now we want to start to move beyond that. And I think that that's one of the great opportunities for this, again, this unique field that you're in its criticality, because these technologies have more importance for these patients you serve than the general primary care ambulatory patient population. So it's very exciting.
Maybe the one thing that I'm thinking of, where agency could be helpful, is moving the pressure off the physician being the only one that can serve in this environment, because that's ultimately not a realistic, it's just a shifting, and the resource shortage will not be served in such a way, so if ACCC can sort of, I don't know, use its advocacy or whatever, so we can get pharmacists, social workers, chaplains, whatever, to be part of this and ultimately create a revenue stream that is commensable for the time spent, on these interactions that ultimately decrease readmissions, increase safety, and all the wonderful things that we're talking about. I think it cannot be just a physician function. It needs to be a broader healthcare team that needs to participate in this revenue generating endeavor. Otherwise, if it's only on physicians, I really don't know if this is going to have the broad impact that we're looking for it to be.
I want to ask you about an idea that came out about 2 years ago with the American Heart Association. They looked at telehealth as a great body of a place where you can do a lot of education and triaging, like you were saying, and mental health support, nutritional support, a lot of what you call ancillary services, where they were thinking of doing, and they never did, and I think that they may revisit it, is to create a super center, if you may, for all the American Heart Association, a place where they will literally have a call center, if you may, or like a center with all of those ancillary service staff that can service all of their constituents under it. So the physician will still take care of all the clinical stuff, but everything else will be forwarded to the telehealth center, right, to kind of take care of everything else around that patient. Now that you guys are talking, I'm thinking, how amazing would that be to be able to do that for ACCC in the same kind of way, where you guys have all of those extender support, if you may, but in a way that you can pull on and everybody else can kind of share in that. Just think about it. It's something that came out before. This is pretty much what Mercy Virtual did, guys. So if you ever want to see something that looks exactly like that in a fee for service, by the way, and in a rural community. Then look at Mercy Virtual, because Mercy Virtual is 135 hospital systems in one center, and it's 100% virtual. So there's no patients in that hospital. It's 100% virtual. So if you just look at Mercy Virtual, see what they did. It's incredible. But that kind of program, I think, can be replicated. It's just a matter of really finding the funds and the context for it. Just putting it out there, something that came to my mind as you were saying what you were saying, because it's so true. It takes a village to take care of a cancer patient. How do you create that virtually? How do you create that virtual village, right, where people can be cared for? I was thinking if we're gonna go around, maybe everybody can kind of like say one thing that they want to take out from this today, or an action item that comes up in their heads today as we are about to close this meeting.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming, and not only for your time, but also the expertise, the degree of expertise around the table, and the varying opinions have been very helpful, particularly for those of us like me who haven't really ventured into this area before. So it's very thought-provoking. I think for ACCC and for the IO Institute, there's going to be a lot to come out of this. I think one takeaway that I have is that it's a tool and it's not the means to the end, and that you really have to define your workflow stream, what is the problem you're trying to solve for, and how to integrate telehealth into that solution.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo that too. I learned a ton today. I took a ton of notes. I came here with the anticipation that I will walk away and know what to do, and that's not what it is. But I came here today and have an understanding how hard it will be to translate that into something manageable at the environment that I'm in. But that's extremely valuable. You know, I think I came in here relatively blue-eyed thinking, all right, there's probably somebody who's already figured this out and I can just copy and paste, and that is not the case. I think we're all learning together, you know. And I think what's most valuable for me today is having contacted all these resources, you know, and now knowing, all right, if I need help, I know where to get started. And I think that's invaluable.
Thank you.
I think for me, I came here looking to learn from all of you about how can we take something from our discussion here and take it to our members, and for me to be able to develop some programming. And I think your first point about using this as a way of bringing education to our members, that's what obviously is close to me. So definitely that's something that I'm going to try to integrate that into some of our educational programming, especially in the IO space.
I also learned a lot today, taking lots of notes. Hard to think of just one thing, but I think the one that stands out, maybe partly recency bias, is the idea of trying to understand how much of an assessment you can actually capture via telemedicine versus not.
So I just want to thank everybody for all of your insights and input. In 2019, with the direction of our executive committee on IO, we recognized that this is an area we really need to put some emphasis and focus on. So that was really the impetus of doing kind of this research, bringing everyone together so that we can kind of start to lay out a plan with what makes sense for our membership. And from my perspective, it was great to hear some of the funding discussions and challenges, because that's specifically one of my roles as well, is, you know, we have to fund these types of educational initiatives. So that was good information, but I learned a ton today. Everybody's expertise and insights. I have a lot more to learn coming out of this as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I learned so much today, and I think my biggest takeaway is to just continue the fight. One of the great lessons in this is that it's not a short battle at all. And so I think sometimes we can get a little discouraged if we've started a program and it hasn't taken off very quickly. And so we wonder, well, I'll say that sometimes we feel the pressure to jump onto the next thing. And so with this, I feel a little bit more encouraged about just being, just persevering through and continuing the fight to continue, because telemedicine is here to stay. So we just have to keep going. Thank you.
I would just like to thank you for the invitation and having an opportunity to come and talk about telemedicine with people that are as interested in it as I am. And I guess it's just really gratifying to see that the technology is taking off, but it still comes down to that people interface and the team approach. And I wasn't kidding. I really believe this. As a practitioner, I'm only as good as the people I practice with in my own clinic, and that's true if I'm practicing and serving people that are across the state of Kansas. So it's nice to know that some of that it's still about us as people and providers too. And
thank you for the invitation as well. I wrote down a couple of takeaways, and one was, is there an opportunity within our practice, Texas Oncology, to use wearables? So I'll go back and ask that question. The other is, can we use a mobile app? I heard some people talk about mobile apps to monitor symptoms in a subgroup. Maybe for one of our value-based care contracts, we have several of those. And then another thing I wrote down is how to get more money from Pharma. We do a lot of research in Texas Oncology, and if there's a way to get more money to measure symptoms or things we're probably already doing, we should try.
So I joined telehealth space in like June or July, and I've been kind of rolling by myself. So this is my first telehealth conference. So my takeaway is I'm like really excited to go back to CTCA and tell them everything I've learned. I would like to know, is there some sort of forum or a chat room where I could learn like who's using what devices, what's working, what's not, what technology has worked for what use cases. I think there's so much viable information at this table. I would like to spend another day with everyone. And to Stormy's point, it was a really good pick me up because I think there's been some discourages along the way. So
I also want to thank you guys for the invitation. Being a part of one of the TRCs, the Mid-Atlantic TRC, and hearing everything that's happening here, I definitely want to encourage the fact that telehealth as itself has required this type of environment where we are all sharing. It's required this type of environment where we can all do this together. It's not a us versus them. It's not an us first. It's a telehealth. If it's going to grow, if it's going to take foothold, it has to be done in this type of environment where we all share openly, share honestly. So I love the expertise around the room. I love the fact that there are so many places doing such amazing work, and just, again, keep up the fight.
I want to thank you all for the invitation as well. I think one of the biggest things I'm taking, I came into this with our very unique CAR-T delivery model, and I'm taking away a lot of new ideas from a lot of you and how we've expanded your telehealth programs that you currently have. I think my biggest takeaway is that there's so many ways to innovate with telehealth. It's not a, round peg in a square hole or vice versa, whatever it is. It's, you can make it for what you need it to do. And in our oncology world, it's kind of a unique place where we get to make it what we want. We have new technologies, new treatments coming out daily, if not hourly, and we can make telemedicine fit those however we want to, and it's exciting.
I'm impressed with how far we've come and how far we have yet to go in consistency and in policies and in crossing state lines and in how much we can utilize all that we have, and harness this amazing tool to move us forward.
Well, I think that today's been great, and I just want to take a moment to thank Janelle for putting together this fabulous summit. Mark and Siggy, you guys have done a great job facilitating it, and to Dr. Williams' point, I think that it's going to be a heavy lift, but I think with, the dedication and the energy that's in the room, and that's just the folks that are in the room, it really shows that there's a lot of people that can lean and support each other in this effort, and I really feel excited about 2020 and the things that we're going to do, especially as it relates to our IO Institute and for our ACCC members. So I'm just looking forward to some of the outputs from this.
I'm going to echo the thank you to everyone. It's been a privilege to listen to this great conversation, very exciting. I think two things I'm looking forward to is the opportunity to share some of this takeaways with the broader ACCC membership. I know we're going to have incredible engagement on this, and the potential for telemedicine to increase patient engagement and their involvement in their own healthcare.
So I think it's been a great and informative day. For me, it struck me that many of the places that are doing good work with this, many of them are here, are almost like independent laboratories conducting experiments somewhat on their own about how to do this. And I think to the extent that ACCC can be a chat room in one way or another where this information can be shared, I think will be incredibly useful. I think you'll, you'll learn about who's been successful in some ways. You'll learn, you may be able to learn who's actually using it, how many people are using it within the membership. And I think that knowledge will be very helpful in planning how you want to try and roll that out across the rest of the membership.
I really appreciate being invited to be a part of this, and I'm really interested in how this worked with this small group, and it was just an excellent forum, I think.
Agree. Thank you. I'm excited to be a part of this and appreciate the opportunity as well. And I think moving forward, I will remain available to facilitate any interactions with ECHO or connecting people with the replication team as needed.
Well, I'm grateful I had this opportunity also. It was a great group. You did a great job of putting together just such a good range of people. And I'm going to go back and work harder on trying to figure out how we do need to measure at least these symptoms in immunotherapies. And I'm also available to continue if there's ever any questions or anything that you'd like to know. I'd certainly be happy to help.
Yeah, and I think my biggest takeaway is that we need to do this more often. This was a great conversation, and I am so grateful that each and every one of you made time to be here today. I really, truly hope that this is just the first of many conversations to come, not only in the IO Institute, but across ACCC more broadly when we start thinking about this technology in cancer care. I want to thank our speakers today, Mark and Siggy, everyone, again, just for being here, all the ACCC staff, our supporters who made this day happen. I know we are at the top of the hour, so I'll just kind of wrap us up that you can expect a follow-up email from me this week. And we will hope to have some content coming out soon, just kind of capturing what we talked about and have this recording available. And I know some of us have to rush out to the airport. There is a shuttle available upstairs that hopefully a few of us can get on board and head to the airport. But again, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate everyone's time and thoughts today.